How good was Pistol Pete Maravich, really? The question has haunted basketball fans, analysts, and historians for decades. Some say he was a magician, a genius ahead of his time, a player whose creativity and skill would make even today's NBA superstars look ordinary. Others argue he was a flashy scorer whose brilliance never translated into championships, a player whose numbers dazzled, but whose impact was limited by circumstances. But when you watch his games, even decades later, the disbelief is immediate.
Forward movement, they called the foul.
Long cross-court pass from Bird to the pistol. Underhanded. Pete Maravich, 31 years old. He said, if I started my...
Every dribble, every behind-the-back pass, every impossible shot from long distance seems so far ahead of the curve that it's almost unfair. Pete didn't just play basketball, he choreographed it, turning every possession into a showcase of artistry, creativity, and audacity. Consider this. Pete scored over 44 points per game in college, without a three-point line, without advanced training, and in an era of slow-paced physical basketball. In the NBA, he routinely averaged over 30 points per game, alongside 5-6 assists, often leading teams that lacked superstar teammates. He didn't just dominate statistically, he redefined how guards could handle the ball, manipulate defenses, and create opportunities seemingly out of thin air. Every move he made, crossovers, no-look passes, floaters from impossible angles, was a demonstration of skill that modern analytics would now classify as highly efficient and game-changing. And yet, despite this genius, Pete remains one of the most underappreciated players in NBA history. He didn't win a championship, he battled injuries, and his teams often struggled despite his brilliance. Critics dismissed him as a showman, labeling his moves as flashy theatrics rather than legitimate basketball strategy. But those who truly study his game understand something shocking. Pistol Pete Maravich may have been better than some of today's stars at the same age, in the same conditions, and possibly even in today's NBA itself. In this video, we'll take you through the full journey of Pistol Pete, from a prodigy in Pennsylvania to a college superstar at LSU, from an NBA rookie finding his footing to a revolutionary guard whose style still echoes in today's game. We'll dive deep into his stats, his creativity, his challenges, and his lasting influence. By the end, you'll be forced to confront a question that basketball fans rarely dare to ask aloud. If Pistol Pete Maravich played in today's NBA, with modern rules, training, and spacing, would he be untouchable? Could he dominate in a way that rivals or even surpasses today's greatest superstars?
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm running out of things to say.
He was called the boy with the sad eyes. But even in his college days at LSU, Pete Maravich brought an irrepressible joy to the basketball court that belied his melancholy appearance. Slight of build, he didn't look the part of a star athlete. But with a basketball in his hand, he was simply breathtaking to watch.
Peter Press Maravich, famously known as Pistol Pete, was born on June 22, 1947, in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, a small industrial town that would rarely find itself on the national sports map. But even from a young age, Pete was no ordinary kid. Basketball ran through his veins, literally and figuratively. His father, Press Maravich, was a former professional player and coach, and he had a singular vision: to create a basketball prodigy, not just a good player. From the moment Pete could hold a ball, his life was intertwined with hoops. By the time he was 3 years old, he was already dribbling, spinning, and experimenting with moves that would seem impossible to older players. The story goes that he would practice up to 15,000 dribbles a day, combining precision with flair, laying the foundation for a game that would later be described as basketball artistry. What made Pete's early years remarkable wasn't just natural talent, it was the methodical way he developed his craft. Unlike most children who practice basic layups and jump shots, Pete's routines were revolutionary. He practiced behind-the-back dribbles, no-look passes, spin moves, and floaters, often for hours on end. His father, Press, watched every session, tweaking techniques, challenging Pete to innovate, and teaching him to see the court differently. While other kids were learning fundamentals, Pete was creating them, experimenting with angles and maneuvers that the basketball world hadn't seen. By middle school, he was already considered a local prodigy, mesmerizing teammates and opponents alike. People in Aliquippa didn't just watch him play, they stood in awe of what seemed impossible, a tiny boy moving with the confidence and skill of a seasoned professional. Pete's high school years at Aliquippa High School were nothing short of legendary. Over 3 seasons, he averaged over 40 points per game, which is astounding considering the era's slower pace and physical play. But it wasn't just scoring that made him special, it was how he scored and shared the ball. He led his team in assists as much as points, turning games into showcases of improvisation and creativity. Defenders struggled to anticipate his moves. Every game was a masterclass in ball handling, spatial awareness, and offensive vision. He became the talk of the region, not only for numbers, but for the sheer artistry of his game. Crowds flocked to see him play, often leaving games buzzing with disbelief. Coaches from across Pennsylvania began taking note, realizing that Pete wasn't just good, he was transforming the very notion of what a guard could do on the floor. Beyond statistics, what made Pete extraordinary was his unmatched combination of creativity and basketball IQ. Even at a young age, he could predict defenders' movements, read passing lanes like a chessboard, and execute plays that seemed to defy physics. His early training under his father emphasized innovation over convention, a philosophy that would carry him through college and into the NBA. Maravich wasn't interested in producing a conventional scorer. He wanted Pete to challenge the game itself. This philosophy paid off. By the time he finished high school, Pete was already being hailed as the most inventive young player in America. Scouting reports from the late 1960s describe a player whose handles could break ankles, whose passes could split defenses, and whose shooting could leave arenas speechless. But Pete's rise wasn't without tension. Critics often labeled his style as showboating or frivolous, arguing that flashy dribbles and behind-the-back passes were ineffective in real games. While many admired his skill, some questioned whether it could translate to competitive basketball at higher levels. Maravich countered this skepticism by continuing to push Pete toward precision and efficiency, insisting that creativity and effectiveness were not mutually exclusive. The result was a young athlete who combined flair with functionality, capable of dazzling audiences while consistently producing results on the scoreboard. By the time college recruiters started to take notice, it was clear, Pistol Pete wasn't just a high school star, he was a revolution waiting to happen. Someone whose style and talent would challenge the boundaries of basketball forever. In sum, Pete's early life was a blend of raw talent, meticulous training, and relentless creativity. From the small gymnasiums of Aliquippa to the attention of national scouts, Pete had already shown that he wasn't just good, he was extraordinary. And while the world wouldn't fully appreciate him yet, those formative years had crafted a player capable of not only dominating the scoreboard, but also transforming basketball into an art form. By the time he stepped onto the collegiate stage, fans and critics alike would soon witness a game so revolutionary, it would forever alter the way basketball was played and perceived. When Pistol Pete Maravich arrived at Louisiana State University, LSU, in 1967, the basketball world was about to witness a transformation, unlike anything it had ever seen. Most freshmen of the era were simply trying to adapt to the college game, but Pete was on another level. With the guidance of his father, Maravich, who also served as LSU's head coach, Pete entered the NCAA as a ready-made phenomenon, a player whose skill, vision, and creativity would rewrite the rules of offensive basketball. And yet, he faced immediate skepticism. Critics questioned whether his flashy style could withstand the rigor of college-level defense, or whether his scoring obsession would translate into team success. These doubts only fueled him. From the first game, Pete displayed an almost supernatural mastery of the court. Unlike most guards who relied on structured plays, Pete made the game fluid and unpredictable. He averaged 44.2 points per game over his 3-year varsity career, a number that still stands as one of the highest in NCAA history. For context, modern college superstars like Jalen Suggs or Chet Holmgren average between 20 and 25 points per game. Pete was almost doubling today's top scorers, and he did it in an era without the three-point line. Every shot he drained from long distance counted for 2 points, meaning his scoring would likely be even more astronomical in today's era with modern rules and spacing. Pete wasn't just a scorer, he also averaged 5.1 assists per game, demonstrating a level of court vision that made him a complete offensive weapon. Watching him pass was like watching a master painter, each no-look dish, behind the back feed, or subtle lob perfectly timed to break defenses down. Opponents couldn't prepare for him. Defenses tried to double-team him, but his dribbling skills, speed, and improvisation made every trap look like an amateur move against a professional chess player. His creativity forced teams to abandon traditional defensive strategies. They were simply outmatched by a guard who could see angles and passing lanes no one else could. One of the most remarkable aspects of Pete's college years was his relentless work ethic. While others took breaks between classes and practices, Pete would spend hours in the gym honing his craft. He reportedly practiced more than 6,000 dribbles a day and developed moves that today's NBA superstars like Kyrie Irving or Stephen Curry could only aspire to replicate. But unlike many modern players, Pete combined artistry with efficiency. His shot selection, while flashy, was often calculated. He knew when to drive, when to pull up, and how to manipulate defenses into leaving shooters open. The result was not just high scoring, but dominance that demanded national attention. By his sophomore year, Pete's legend was undeniable. He led LSU to the NCAA tournament and won multiple national scoring awards, including recognition as a consensus All-American. Fans packed arenas just to witness his jaw-dropping moves, and media coverage began to portray him as a basketball magician. But controversy followed him. Critics labeled him as a showboat, or accused him of prioritizing style over substance. Pete's response was simple: the numbers didn't lie. Scoring 44 points a game while averaging over 5 assists proved that artistry and effectiveness were not mutually exclusive. What makes Pete's college career even more incredible is considering the physicality of his era. Defenders were bigger, games were slower, and zones were designed to shut down scorers. Yet Pete thrived. He often played more than 35 minutes per game, carried his team's offense, and still produced at an elite level. It wasn't just about scoring, it was transforming the entire concept of offensive strategy, forcing coaches and fans to rethink what was possible from a guard. And while LSU did not win a national championship during his tenure, Pete's influence went beyond titles. He inspired a generation of players to think creatively, to expand the limits of scoring and playmaking. By the time he left college, he had scored a staggering 3,667 points in just 3 seasons, a record that still echoes through NCAA history. Analysts often speculate that if Pete had access to modern rules, three-point line, faster pace, advanced nutrition, he could have averaged 50 points per game, rewriting college basketball records entirely. In sum, Pete's college years were more than a prelude to his NBA career. They were a masterclass in basketball innovation, a display of skill, creativity, and audacity that set the stage for the legend to come. He proved that scoring could be art, that passing could be poetry, and that a single player could challenge the game itself. By the time the NBA called his name in the 1970 draft, the world knew Pistol Pete Maravich was not just a player, he was a revolution waiting to explode on the professional stage. When Pistol Pete Maravich entered the NBA in 1970, the league was very different from the college playground where he had dominated. The NBA was more physical, the pace slower, and defenses designed to punish ball handlers who relied on creativity over brute strength. Yet, Pete was no ordinary rookie. Drafted 3rd overall by the Atlanta Hawks, he stepped onto the professional stage armed with his incredible handles, court vision, and scoring ability, ready to prove that his college dominance was no fluke. The first few seasons, however, were a mixture of brilliance, adjustment, and learning to survive the NBA grind. As a rookie, Pete averaged 23.2 points per game and 4.1 assists, numbers that immediately placed him among the league's top scoring guards. But statistics alone couldn't capture what made him extraordinary. Watching Pete play was witnessing the evolution of basketball itself. He dribbled at a speed and with a creativity unseen in the professional game at the time. His signature moves, behind-the-back dribbles, spin moves, floaters, and no-look passes often left defenders confused, frustrated, and out of position. Coaches had to rethink traditional defensive strategies just to keep him contained. And yet, despite his scoring ability, Atlanta was not a powerhouse team, which sometimes muted his shine in the media compared to more dominant franchises. One of the biggest challenges for Pete during these early years was adapting to the physicality of the NBA. Defenders were stronger, bigger, and relentless. Many tried to use brute force to stop him, often fouling aggressively, but Pete's agility and intelligence allowed him to maneuver around them with precision. He became one of the few guards of his era who could consistently break down defenses with dribbling, passing, and unorthodox movement, making his team better even when surrounded by less talented teammates. His rookie season already suggested that he was not just a scorer, but a playmaker capable of transforming the offense around him. By his second season, Pete's numbers skyrocketed. He averaged 27.7 points and 4.4 assists per game, establishing himself as one of the league's premier offensive talents. He also led the NBA in field goal attempts, showing that while some critics labeled him as flashy, his work rate and scoring efficiency were undeniable. What made him different from other stars, however, was how he scored. Each basket was a combination of artistry, misdirection, and timing. He could turn a seemingly impossible angle into a perfectly placed shot, often using the defender's momentum against them. Watching Pete was less about statistics and more about witnessing the beauty and innovation of basketball in motion. Despite his individual brilliance, Pete faced adversity in Atlanta. The Hawks were inconsistent, and while he had the talent of a superstar, team success was limited. Analysts debated whether Pete's style could truly lead a team to a championship, or if it was too unconventional. Yet, Pete never changed his approach. He played to his strengths: vision, creativity, and unrelenting scoring. Over time, his perseverance paid off. Fans began recognizing him not just for his points, but for his impact on the game itself. Every pass, every dribble, and every basket became a teaching moment for coaches and players, showing how offense could be reimagined. By the mid-1970s, when he moved to the New Orleans Jazz, Pete had matured into a player who could carry a team offensively while remaining a magician on the court. He was no longer just a rookie finding his footing. He was a pioneer redefining guard play, forcing defenses to adjust in ways they had never done before. He averaged over 30 points per game during his peak seasons in New Orleans, showing that once given freedom, his talent could dominate at the highest level. The early NBA years weren't just about scoring. They were about proving that creativity, flair, and intelligence could compete and even thrive in a league dominated by size and strength. Pete's early NBA career laid the foundation for a legacy that would continue to grow in the coming years. It demonstrated that a player ahead of his time could challenge conventions, inspire a generation, and redefine what it meant to be a guard. Critics who doubted him began to recognize his genius, while fans were captivated by his unmatched style. The stage was set for Pistol Pete Maravich to become not just an NBA star, but a transformative figure in basketball history, whose influence would resonate far beyond his era. Pistol Pete Maravich's peak years in the NBA were nothing short of spectacular, revolutionary, and ahead of their time. After transitioning to the New Orleans Jazz in 1974, Pete had finally found a team where he could showcase his complete skill set. Freed from some of the constraints of Atlanta, he became the centerpiece of the offense, and his game evolved into a mesmerizing display of scoring, passing, and pure basketball intelligence. In the 1976-77 season, he averaged 31.1 points per game and 5.4 assists, demonstrating his dual threat as both scorer and facilitator. At a time when the league was more physical and defenses were less accommodating to creative guards, these numbers were astonishing. What made Pete's peak so remarkable wasn't just raw statistics, but how he achieved them. He was a player who seemed to bend the laws of physics with the basketball, performing behind-the-back dribbles, no-look passes, spin moves, and shots from angles that defenders could not anticipate. His scoring came not from brute strength or athleticism alone, but from an extraordinary combination of vision, timing, and deception. Watching him was like observing a masterclass in improvisation, with every game presenting new maneuvers that left opponents bewildered and spectators spellbound. Analysts often compare his offensive creativity to modern players like Stephen Curry for deep shooting range, Kyrie Irving for ball handling, and Chris Paul for court vision. Yet Pete achieved it all in an era without the benefits of modern spacing, three-point lines, or analytics-driven offense. During these peak years, Pete's shooting volume was unprecedented. He often attempted more than 25 to 30 field goals per game, yet maintained impressive efficiency considering the pace and physicality of the NBA in the 1970s. Modern NBA players benefit from fast-paced offense, emphasis on spacing, and advanced conditioning. Pete achieved similar statistical dominance without any of these advantages, relying purely on skill, basketball IQ, and sheer work ethic. His ability to control a game, force defenses to collapse, and still create opportunities for teammates was proof of his elite playmaking ability. Every assist, every move, and every basket contributed to a performance that blurred the line between athlete and artist. Pete's peak years were also a period where his influence began to extend beyond the box score. Opposing coaches developed new defensive schemes just to slow him down, yet he consistently found ways to exploit gaps and manipulate defenders. Even in games where the Jazz struggled, Pete's individual brilliance shone through, forcing recognition from fans, journalists, and fellow players. The league may have underestimated him early in his career, but by the mid to late 1970s, it was clear that Pistol Pete was not just a scorer, but a transformative offensive force. If we translate his peak numbers to today's NBA, the results are staggering. Experts estimate that in a modern pace and space system with three-point shooting, Pete could average 35+ points per game, while also contributing 8-9 assists, rivaling some of the greatest offensive seasons in history. Comparisons with current stars like Luka Dončić, Damian Lillard, or Stephen Curry suggest that Pete would not just compete, he could dominate. His ability to create shots for himself and others, combined with unprecedented flair, makes the argument that he would be a modern superstar even in the most competitive eras. During this period, Pete also earned 10 All-Star selections and multiple scoring honors, cementing his legacy statistically while also redefining basketball for the next generation. He was more than just numbers, he was a visionary who proved that creativity, intelligence, and improvisation could exist alongside efficiency and dominance. For many fans, his peak years remain the definitive proof that Pistol Pete Maravich was a player whose talent transcended time. In essence, Pete's peak years were a perfect storm of innovation, skill, and statistical brilliance, solidifying him as one of the most exciting and revolutionary players in NBA history. He didn't just score points or collect assists, he changed how the game was played, leaving an indelible mark on basketball that continues to influence every generation of guards who pick up the ball today. Watching Pete at his peak was a lesson in artistry, creativity, and what it truly means to dominate a game in a way that goes beyond numbers. What set Pistol Pete Maravich apart from virtually every player in NBA history was not just his ability to score or pass, but the sheer artistry of his game. Watching Pete was like watching a painter at work, a composer conducting a symphony, or a magician performing illusions. He wasn't just a guard who moved the ball, he reinvented how a guard could command the floor. Every dribble, every spin, every behind-the-back move was executed with such precision and timing that defenders often seemed frozen in disbelief, unsure whether they had been outplayed or simply outsmarted. Pete's creativity went far beyond aesthetics. He introduced innovations that would later become staples in modern basketball, but were unheard of in his era. Behind-the-back dribbles to reset offense, spin moves to evade defenders, and passes that appeared impossible became his signature. Unlike many flashy players who relied solely on style, Pete's moves were effective and efficient. His passes were rarely reckless. Each was calculated to open scoring opportunities for teammates, or to manipulate defenses into leaving him open. In a sense, he treated the basketball court as both a playground and a laboratory, experimenting in ways that would influence the NBA for decades. Defenders in his time struggled to contain him. Even the best defenders couldn't anticipate where Pete would go, or how he would exploit their positioning. Unlike today's NBA, which emphasizes spacing and analytics, the 1970s were slower paced and more physical, yet Pete thrived. He could create his own shot against double teams, thread impossible passes, and make layups or mid-range shots that seemed to defy logic. His court vision was so advanced that he often saw passing lanes and opportunities before the defense even knew they existed, a skill comparable to modern superstars like Chris Paul or LeBron James. Pete's shooting mechanics were also revolutionary. He developed an ability to shoot accurately from unusual angles, off the dribble, and under extreme pressure, something that many contemporaries couldn't replicate. While the three-point line didn't exist during most of his career, he routinely sank long-range shots that today would count for 3 points. Analysts speculate that if Pete played in the modern NBA with spacing and three-point rules, he could easily average over 35 points per game, combining his scoring and playmaking into a level of dominance rarely seen in any era. Another hallmark of Pete's style was his unpredictability. Modern defenders train extensively to anticipate opponents' movements, but Pete seemed to exist outside conventional logic. No two plays were the same. He could feint left, spin right, then make a behind-the-back pass while still maintaining control of the ball. Every game was a showcase of innovation, forcing coaches to rethink defensive strategies. His impact wasn't just on the scoreboard. It was on how the entire game was approached, changing the mindset of teams, players, and future generations. Despite the brilliance, some critics dismissed him as a showman rather than a serious competitor. They failed to recognize that every flashy move was backed by precision, purpose, and basketball intelligence. Pete wasn't just entertaining, he was strategically brilliant, combining creativity with efficiency. This blend of artistry and effectiveness makes him arguably one of the most influential guards in history. A player whose DNA can be seen in almost every modern NBA point guard, who handles the ball with skill and vision. In essence, Pistol Pete Maravich's style of play was magical, yet functional, creative yet strategic, and revolutionary for its time. He didn't just score points, he redefined what it meant to orchestrate offense, control the game, and dazzle audiences simultaneously. In today's NBA, with pace and space offense, long-range shooting, and highly skilled guards, Pete would be a cultural and statistical phenomenon, a superstar whose influence could dominate highlight reels, analytics boards, and championship discussions. His court mastery ensured that even decades later, fans still watch old footage in awe, marveling at the genius who played basketball as both art and science. Despite Pistol Pete Maravich's brilliance, his career was far from smooth sailing. The very creativity and flair that defined him also made him physically vulnerable. Pete played in an era when NBA defenses were brutal. Officiating was less protective of skilled ball handlers, and players endured a grueling schedule without the modern benefits of sports science, conditioning, or recovery programs. Throughout his career, he battled injuries, particularly knee and back problems, that often limited his explosiveness and mobility. Yet, even when hampered by physical setbacks, he continued to perform at an elite level, demonstrating not only skill but resilience and determination that few could match. Pete's challenges were not purely physical. He faced constant scrutiny and skepticism from fans, media, and even fellow players. Many considered his style too flashy, labeling him a showboat who relied more on theatrics than fundamentals. Critics often failed to appreciate the underlying intelligence of his game. Every behind-the-back pass, spin move, or deep-range shot was calculated to maximize efficiency and manipulate defenders. In fact, his audacious style often created statistical opportunities for teammates, turning individual flair into collective success. Yet, without championships or a consistently dominant team around him, some fans and analysts unfairly diminished his impact. Another significant challenge for Pete was playing for struggling franchises. The Atlanta Hawks offered him limited support, and while the New Orleans Jazz gave him more freedom, the team lacked the talent and structure to consistently compete for titles. Pete's genius shone brightest when he had the ball in his hands, but basketball is ultimately a team sport. Without elite teammates to complement him, Pete's teams rarely achieved postseason glory. For critics focused solely on rings, this became a convenient excuse to downplay his greatness. But anyone who truly studied his career could see that he dominated despite limitations, not because of them. Beyond injuries and team struggles, Pete also faced the mental burden of being ahead of his time. His innovations were so radical that defenders and coaches often couldn't adapt, and fans sometimes misunderstood his genius. He was a pioneer in an era unprepared for the creativity he brought to the court. Modern analysts now recognize that many of Pete's moves foreshadowed the skills of today's elite guards. Yet during his career, he was often labeled eccentric rather than revolutionary. Despite this, he remained committed to his style, prioritizing artistry, efficiency, and vision over conformity. Pete's challenges make his achievements even more remarkable. He averaged over 30 points per game during peak seasons, led the league in assists, and transformed offensive strategies, all while battling injuries, skepticism, and team limitations. The fact that he performed at such a high level under these conditions speaks volumes about his genius and resilience. In many ways, Pete's career highlights the difference between raw statistics and true influence. While some players achieve numbers in ideal conditions, Pete excelled in adversity, proving that innovation and skill can overcome obstacles that mere athleticism cannot. Looking back, Pete's injuries and challenges contribute to a larger narrative. He was a misunderstood genius, a player whose legacy was obscured by circumstances rather than diminished by talent. Modern fans and players can only imagine what he might have accomplished with today's medical advancements, training techniques, and supportive team structures. With proper conditioning, Pete's creativity, vision, and scoring ability might have reached levels comparable to the greatest superstars in NBA history. His struggles underscore both the brilliance of his achievements and the tragedy of an era that did not fully appreciate the revolutionary nature of his game. In conclusion, Pistol Pete Maravich's career was defined not just by genius, but by resilience, adaptability, and courage. He faced injuries that could have ended lesser careers, skepticism that might have discouraged ordinary players, and teams that often lacked the firepower to complement his skills. Yet, through it all, Pete maintained a style that was uniquely his own, inspiring a generation of players to embrace creativity, intelligence, and artistry. These challenges make his legacy not only impressive statistically, but timelessly influential, showing that true greatness can flourish even in adversity, and that the NBA and the world was witnessing something far ahead of its time. If there is one question that haunts basketball fans and analysts alike, it is this: how would Pistol Pete Maravich fare in today's NBA? On paper, comparisons are daunting. Modern superstars like Stephen Curry, Luka Dončić, Trae Young, and Damian Lillard dominate with a combination of pace, space, three-point shooting, and analytics-driven decision-making. But Pistol Pete was a pioneer, a player who, decades before these innovations, was performing many of the same skills under far more challenging conditions. He played without the three-point line for most of his career, in a league where defenses were physical, rules less forgiving, and athletic training rudimentary by modern standards. Despite these obstacles, his scoring, passing, and court vision were ahead of his era in ways that would make today's NBA seem familiar to him. Statistically, Pete's career numbers already suggest modern dominance. During his peak seasons with the New Orleans Jazz, he averaged over 30 points per game, while also contributing 5 to 6 assists, despite leading teams that lacked supporting stars. In today's high-pace, three-point heavy offenses, analysts speculate he could average 35 to 38 points per game with 8 to 9 assists, rivaling or even surpassing some of the best offensive seasons ever recorded. His signature deep-range shots, which were only worth 2 points in his time, would become three-pointers, dramatically increasing his scoring efficiency and game impact. Pete would also thrive in today's defensive schemes, which favor spacing and rely on guards to exploit mismatches, situations Pete practically invented decades ago. Beyond raw numbers, Pete's style of play would make him a cultural and highlight phenomenon in today's NBA. Modern fans revel in ankle-breaking crossovers, no-look passes, and deep-range pull-ups, the same moves that defined Pete's career. Players like Kyrie Irving or Stephen Curry could be seen as spiritual heirs to his innovation, but Pete combined all these elements in a single package: scoring, passing, and creativity, with intelligence and precision. No modern player has consistently produced all three at the level Pete achieved while under constant defensive pressure, meaning his skill set would translate seamlessly, and perhaps dominate today's game. Another factor in Pete's potential modern success is his adaptability. While some argue that his flashy style might be risky against today's analytical defenses, Pete's genius lay in reading defenses and exploiting their weaknesses. He could manipulate defenders, create open shots, and distribute the ball with surgical accuracy. Essentially, he would be both a volume scorer and a high-efficiency facilitator, a combination highly coveted in today's NBA. Moreover, his charisma and flair would make him a marketable superstar, appealing to fans worldwide, and creating highlight reels that could dominate social media, much like Curry or Ja Morant today. Yet comparisons also highlight the tragedy of era differences. Many modern fans and analysts underrate Pete because he lacked championships or dominant supporting casts, whereas today's players often benefit from super teams and advanced analytics. Imagine Pete with a modern conditioning program, faster pace, optimized three-point spacing, and stronger teammates. It's conceivable he could rival LeBron James, Steph Curry, or Kevin Durant in single-season production, offensive impact, and highlight creation. In many ways, he was a blueprint for the modern NBA guard, a player capable of scoring from anywhere, creating for teammates, and turning every possession into an opportunity for offense. Ultimately, comparing Pistol Pete to today's NBA is not about speculation, it's about recognizing innovation, intelligence, and skill that transcends eras. He was already performing moves and orchestrating offenses that modern stars rely on, yet he did it in a harsher, less optimized environment. If he played today, Pete wouldn't just be competitive, he would likely be among the most dominant and entertaining players in history. He was a revolution before the revolution, a player whose creativity, vision, and scoring prowess make us ask a haunting question: could anyone stop Pistol Pete Maravich if he played in the modern NBA? Pistol Pete Maravich's legacy is less about championships or team accolades, and more about the transformative influence he had on basketball as a sport. While many players are remembered for stats or rings, Pete is remembered for redefining what it means to be a guard, a playmaker, and a scorer. He introduced creativity into a professional sport that at the time was rigid and physical. His behind-the-back passes, ankle-breaking crossovers, no-look feeds, and deep-range shots became a blueprint for modern guards, influencing generations of players from Kyrie Irving and Stephen Curry to Damian Lillard and Trae Young. He wasn't just a player, he was a visionary whose court innovations continue to resonate decades later. One of the clearest markers of Pete's influence is how often elements of his style appear in today's NBA. The emphasis on ball handling, pace, three-point shooting, and highlight-driven offense can all be traced back to Maravich's ingenuity. While modern athletes benefit from advanced analytics, modern nutrition, and optimized training, Pete achieved greatness using sheer skill, intelligence, and creativity. Analysts often say that Pete was a player ahead of his time, and watching his old games today reveals a player whose movements and decisions are eerily aligned with modern basketball strategy. Every dribble, every shot, and every pass seems like a lesson in offensive innovation, inspiring players to think beyond conventional basketball. Beyond basketball technique, Pete's legacy is also emotional and cultural. Fans who watched him live often describe a sense of awe. As if basketball itself became a performance art, he brought joy, excitement, and artistry to a game that was otherwise dominated by brute strength and structured plays. Teammates recalled being inspired by his creativity and leadership, even when the Jazz struggled to compete for championships. His influence transcended wins and losses, showing that impact can be measured not only in numbers, but in inspiration, innovation, and the way the game is perceived. Moreover, Pete's story is a cautionary tale about era and recognition. Despite averaging over 30 points per game, leading the league in scoring, and dazzling fans with his unprecedented skill, he didn't receive the same acclaim or mainstream attention as contemporaries who were less innovative. Critics focused on his lack of championships, rather than his mastery of the craft, highlighting a common problem in sports history. Greatness is often measured by team success, not individual genius. Yet in hindsight, basketball historians and analysts increasingly recognize that Pete's contributions laid the groundwork for everything we love about today's NBA guards, making him one of the most influential players of all time. His influence also extends to the way young players are coached. Modern guards are encouraged to develop handles, vision, and off-ball creativity, skills Pete personified decades ago. His approach inspired coaches and players to embrace individuality, creativity, and the art of improvisation. Players now routinely practice behind-the-back dribbles, spin moves, and cross-court no-look passes that Pete popularized, yet he remains underappreciated compared to modern stars who built upon his blueprint. In many ways, every flashy guard in today's NBA owes a debt to Pistol Pete Maravich, a player who dared to play differently, and in doing so transformed the sport forever. In summary, Pistol Pete Maravich's legacy is timeless. It is a blend of creativity, skill, intelligence, and inspiration that transcends statistics, eras, and even championship titles. He changed basketball not just through points or assists, but by demonstrating that artistry, innovation, and individuality are essential to greatness. From his electrifying dribbles to his visionary passes, he left an indelible mark that continues to shape the game, influence modern superstars, and captivate fans worldwide. Pete was more than a player, he was a revolution, and his influence ensures that every generation of guards will carry a piece of his genius onto the court. So, what if Pistol Pete Maravich played in today's NBA? Imagine him stepping onto a court where the three-point line rewards deep-range shooting, where pace and space opens driving lanes, where sports science optimizes every step of training and recovery. Imagine the combination of his court vision, ball handling, and scoring creativity amplified by modern rules, advanced conditioning, and analytic-driven strategies. The result is staggering to even contemplate. A player who could score 35-plus points per game, dish 8-9 assists, break ankles at will, and control the flow of the game in ways that would make the current stars look ordinary. Pistol Pete was built for this era, even though he played decades before it existed. In today's game, he wouldn't just be a highlight reel. He would force defenses to adapt, push coaches to rethink strategy, and captivate a global audience in ways only a handful of players have ever achieved. His dribbles, passes, and shots would dominate Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, turning every possession into a viral moment. Think Stephen Curry meets Kyrie Irving meets Chris Paul, all rolled into one, with creativity and audacity unmatched in any era. And yet, unlike many modern superstars, Pete's genius wasn't dependent on athleticism alone. It was pure skill, basketball IQ, and vision, a combination that would make him almost untouchable even in the hyper-competitive modern NBA. And here's the real tension. Despite all his brilliance, Pete never won a championship, never had a super team to carry him, and often played through injuries. The question isn't just about talent, it's about opportunity. With today's rules, sports science, and team strategies, could Pistol Pete have been the single greatest guard in NBA history? Could he have broken scoring records that seem untouchable, redefined the guard position, and reshaped the way basketball is played globally? The answer is as thrilling as it is controversial, almost certainly yes. Pistol Pete Maravich's legacy is not just in numbers, not just in highlights, and not just in anecdotes. It's in the idea of basketball as art, science, and pure creativity, a philosophy that continues to influence modern players. He was more than a scorer or a passer. He was a revolution on the court. And as we watch today's NBA stars dribble, pass and shoot, one question lingers in the minds of fans everywhere. What heights could Pistol Pete have reached if he were playing today? Could he have been untouchable, a superstar for the ages, and the ultimate bridge between past legends and modern greatness?